So I'd like to give a quick thank you to Zach C. On my previous video, he left a comment letting me know on my triple rare website that I wasn't accepting most card payments. So thanks to him, I was able to get that solved. So if you were having that trouble yourself, just know that that problem is now fixed. I have a new sticker drop coming out very soon. Actually, here's a preview of the newest piece I've been working on. I thought YouTube deserved to see it first because that's where I've gotten my start. So we're talking about Reijy today. Reijy, if you don't know, got his buff actually early for us compared to Japan, which in itself I really like. A big disadvantage of playing the global version is that the meta is usually solved by the Japanese meta. We're just kind of following suit. One way that global can sometimes get in front of this or try to make our meta a little more interesting is when they give us our buffs and our nerfs early. This is obviously because the people who are buffing and nerfing them know that there's a problem with them, so why make us wait to solve the problem? In the case with Bladewing Reijy, he got two ability buffs in a way. One is just a natural when he attacks the Vanguard, he gets to now Soul Charge 1 and then he'll get plus 1k. It's mainly the Soul Charge one that's really important now, because now he can Soul Charge beyond just the on-place ability. Speaking of the on-place ability, now when he goes to look for the 3 copies of a card, he's also going to check the drop. So now if, let's say, a unit has been retired or Dimension Creeper has been sent to the drop from our soul, we can now go get their copies again. This basically just makes it so the deck has an easier time getting to that 15 card soul. This deck list is basically the exact same as my Turbo Reijy build. I have made slight changes, and that's just because the deck doesn't need to turbo as hard. But what we're going to be talking about in this video is what we're able to do with what we currently have and what we're missing and how that's holding us back. So what we're working with, obviously we have Reijy. Things to note, Reijy soul charges no matter what. So obviously you can stop soul charging at 14. This is so that when Reijy attacks, he'll be able to get himself to 15 without you having to spend more resources getting to that 15. This will make decking out more likely because now you can't just put a brakes on your soul charging after 15. Every time Reijy's swinging, you're going to be soul charging, which is one less card in your deck. I'm still playing the 4 Dimension Creeper. That's because soul charging is still very important, and him having multiple copies of himself in soul with Reijy is still a very consistent way of getting us there very early. If we were able to ride Dimension Creeper, that means we're going to want to Soul Blast him before we ride Reijy again. This is so that when we go and get our copies of Dimension Creeper, we're going to want as many copies in the drop zone as well. This was sometimes a mistake I would make because playing old Reijy, you would not soul charge until the very last second. This is so that you have a more likely chance of having your triggers in the deck. But now you're having to soul charge a little bit earlier than you were anticipating. This way you can soul charge specific cards that you need, such as Dimension Creeper. The only card I have added to the deck is Demon Bike. Bike does a lot more than I originally thought he would. I used to think he would just be like a final turn play, using him to make a big column with extra crit, maybe have 2 of them out to go for a multiple crit swinging turn. I would even use him as like a distraction, so I'd place him in the front row, make your opponent swing into him rather than swing into other units that we're trying to keep. But the more I've played him, the more I see how good he is. He adds copies of himself to the deck, which means we're going to have an easier time not decking out. When you have a game without Reijy, the deck doesn't really work. So now that we are playing Demon Bike, we now have at least a backup unit that can swing with multiple crit, which kind of does the same thing. It is a little bit harder because then we can't do the cool thing of holding the opponent at 3 damage the entire game, but this at least gives us a little bit more pressure. Since we're still playing the original Amon, Bike can swing first, dealing 2 damage, and usually Amon can be so gigantic that he can even swing over those defensive triggers. Something you'll run into is when you're doing the whole keep your opponent at 3 damage thing, if you're not able to kill them and the game ends, you'll get a low amount of VP. VP is given off of the damage you've dealt times 500, I believe. So if you're only able to deal 3 damage, I think that's only 1500 VP compared to the 3000 you'd get if you had won, or the 25 you would have gotten if you had just dealt them to 5 damage. That's not a big deal, obviously, but just know if the thing that you care about most is just VP climbing, this might not be the deck for you. PGs in the deck are still kind of awkward. You obviously need to run them as they are our only defensive capability. Since we need a good early game to get us to that 15 soul, and PGs don't help us with that. Damn, the video wasn't playing. I'll usually just send the PG back to the deck during my mulligan, just to make sure that I get the more important pieces. And then just hope I see him later at some point. Similar to the soul charging that Reijy now does, draw triggers are still a double-edged sword. We need to play them because DI has no draw power, so we need them to help us get to our resources. But they make decking out faster And at times we aren't expecting it. You know, those turns where you have like 4 cards in deck and you're like, oh, well, that means I can swing at least once. And then one of them's a draw. You flip it and then one goes to damage next turn. And then, yeah. Similar to Genesis, we both have like the whole decking out problem. They can play crits because they have drawing power within their deck with Fortuna, while we do not. Besides that, the rest of the deck is just the typical soul charging engine with Emblem Master, Free Traveler, Succubus. Gwyn's still really nice because let's say we just top deck him. Now we have a unit that can swing at 1 Interceptor. He can now retire the 2nd Interceptor, and then Reijy can still be swung at the Vanguard. You don't ever really want Reijy with the 3 crit ever swinging at rear guards, because obviously that's a waste of potential. Now, what we are missing, even though Amon Reverse isn't as good as Reijy, it's still great to have as a backup compared to just regular Amon. Amon Reverse being able to have crits of his own makes it so that along with Demon Bike, now we have multiple units swinging with 2 crit. So that means as soon as they get to 4, now they are in this life or death game. It's not as nice as the Reijy thing where we're able to keep them out of limit break, but it's still a form of pressure that the deck right now does not have. Along with like Amon Reverse, he gets this whole like support network along with him that allows for like really efficient soul charging. They have a starter that allows us to draw, which is amazing. Units that soul charge on place and soul charge 2 instead of 1. The on place is really important because units like Emblem Master have to hit the Vanguard. So that means there's going to be turns where you're swinging Emblem Master at Vanguard instead of Reijy, which in itself is a wasted soul charge. Yes, it's soul charging 3, so it's still really good on its own. That's still a decision you had to make rather than just being able to have your cake and eat it too. Yes, most of these units have to have Amon on the Vanguard to do this, but that means that during turns 1 and 2, we're soul charging a lot quicker, which is still doing that turbo soul charging thing that we want to do, while still being able to keep a lot of our resources going. So obviously the deck, once set 13 comes out, is going to get a big power boost, but how it plays today with the Reijy buff, but nothing else. See, in Japan, the deck with set 13 with it is basically tier 1-ish. Without set 13, I don't think this deck is near that yet. It's definitely a lot stronger than it was a month ago. You can actually climb with it, but the thing is, it's still very inconsistent, which is kind of the biggest problem. You will have games where if you don't draw into Reijy, then there's not really much happening. And sadly, we don't have another backup boss monster that can really give the same pressure. And we can't just lean on Bike the entire time. We need another boss monster. We need a boss monster that's doing something proactive, more than just regular Mon, sadly. So if you're a big DI fan and you just can't wait until next month to play it, I recommend just pulling out your DI deck and just playing around with it just to get into the feels again, to get you excited for next month. But I don't recommend just like sitting on it for the entire season and try to climb with it, just because you're just going to lose games at a rate that is not going to help you climb as quickly. Again, thank you to anyone that is supporting me through Triple Rare. It means a lot. I love designing stuff for it. I'm really excited for the next sticker drop that should be within the next couple weeks. I plan on doing some kind of giveaway when that happens, so please follow Triple Rare on Twitter or Instagram. Those will be where I announce the giveaways. I never know how to end these. That's all I got.